Hello, it's Samuel Larsen here, and today we're going to go over part 3 of my CRO notes from Digital Elite Camp 2017. So CRO and traffic is the topic, so let's get started again. Now we have a wide variety of talks to go through, and these are just my personal notes of what I've found valuable in terms of my perspective. So there are little personal memos in a sense, and I will be opening up exactly why I chose these ones over all the others. So let's get started. And the first quote: start with the customer and work backwards. And this is here more as a reminder, because it's always so easy to start thinking from our own perspective. Like basically our own world circles around us, and oftentimes we just forget that we're actually not doing business for us in a sense, but for the customer. And it goes down to, or comes back to, this one quote where it's like, for us to achieve our goals, the customer must first achieve theirs. So if you're only thinking about yourself and like maybe being like that kind of a pushy salesman who's only like interested in pushing his products no matter what like the customer would like, then you're probably not being a customer centric in that sense. And also very important to keep in mind that it's happening on an emotional level. So once you put together a site, for example, that's when you start to get your data, and that's like the touch point. So whatever is on that site will generate stimulus, which will go to the brain, and that stimulus will have a reaction in the brain, and that reaction should generate you money. So this is the order actually. Like many people think that the brain comes before stimulus, but stimulus actually comes before, because it's that emotional response. It's the old brain, so to say, the lizard brain, that is acting faster than the new brain where all our highly intellectual thoughts are happening. So just because we think on this level of complexity, and we think we ourselves are independent, smart beings, it's not actually really that way, because as much as you might have a brain, you cannot override the stimulus effect because it's actually happening before things hit your brain. All right, so let's move on and let's talk about how to run an optimization program in a company. So let's say you have a little bit of a bigger company, at least a few people, and you start your CRO program. And this is mistakes that I've done in the past as well. I haven't got everybody fully on board. Now, why is it so crucial to have everybody fully on board on an optimization program? Well, basically, on a bigger organization, you would have different teams, different departments. So you might, for example, have a product team. You might have a marketing team. Now, those two teams might want to push different messages, and they want to push their message out. Product team is super excited and wants to tell about the product. The marketing team is thinking of like on a different level in a sense. So there's going to be a lot of friction, and not everybody is bought into the benefits necessarily, and that might cause people to go against that. So you want to avoid a place where people are actually not bought in. Like not everybody understands the benefits, and there's this like silent resistance. So this is one of those things where everybody needs to be on board, and I think this is something that is very much overplayed in like a marketing speech. Like, so everybody's always saying like everybody needs to be on board with our efforts, but in terms of CRO, I think this is especially true because you are working like on things that are like cross departments, and it affects everybody. So that's why it's good and necessary to get that buy-in. All right, the best learning is experimental. So I would actually like say that the only learning is experimental, because you can't just learn theory with having it up in your brain and like somebody said this. The only way it's really going to come through to you is if you actually take it into and experiment that. Because if you just have some like abstract theory that your brain has no use for, your business has no use for, it's going to be old and forgotten pretty quickly. So that's where experimenting and putting things into practice becomes really important. Now let's continue on the hiring side a little bit. So as you would expand your business, like you would need some more people, at least to have a real automated business, so to say. So how do you do this actually? Like when you're onboarding new people who are not necessarily that skillful yet, how do you get them up to speed very quickly? So this guy had an interesting idea. So send your people to your competitors for a couple of weeks to learn, and your competitors would get free people for a couple of weeks, and your people get, like, in a sense, free education, free learning from there. So it's actually creating this win-win situation, which is what business is all about. So they could go there, learn there for just a couple of weeks, and come back, implement those processes that they've learned. And of course this needs to be something that you would both benefit from, so it's not like cleaning the floors type of work or something like that where you're not going to learn. But really I would say this, and I completely agree with this statement here: value equals knowledge plus skill multiplied by attitude. So this is something I've noticed when hiring for my own business, but also when onboarding new clients. So I want to work with people who are highly motivated, and as long as they're highly motivated, who really want to get things done, then this knowledge and skill part, they will both be multiplied. And I would kind of think of this equation in two ways. Over time, your knowledge and skills will multiply a lot faster as you have a good attitude, because it doesn't really matter what your skill level is right now. You can be really good at anything in 5 years, as long as you have the attitude to keep at it. But also, if your knowledge and skills are amazing, but your attitude completely sucks, you are going to be useless. And this would actually have almost a negative effect in an organization. If you have like attitude of -1, it might actually be, in an extreme case, something that you're actually not even producing for that organization. You're taking it backwards, even though you're technically working there. So attitude is the multiplier. People need to be hungry, and really, like all masters, they actually love their trade. So it will be very difficult to learn anything if you don't love what you do. And if you love what you do, you're going to learn it pretty quickly. So take into account these kind of things, like, are you in e-commerce, for example, only to make money? Do you love it? Are you hungry enough? And maybe if you're not, if you're only like there to make money, to get a couple of quick sales, you're probably not going to last when it gets tougher. So either you need to find people to run it for you, or you need to learn to love it. And it's not like you learn or you love everything from the day one. I would say it gets more fun as you get better, and that has been my experience. But you need to have that hunger, at least in the beginning. So this is just what I said. Hire an attitude. You can always teach them as long as they are motivated. All right, next talk. The shocking truth about CRO programs. Well, this wasn't actually anything too shocking, to be honest, but it's about similar things as we got through before. So getting that buy-in and more like involving the client as well. So involving everybody in that organization so that they feel part of the process and not left out. So that would be engaging and educating in a sense. So the more you can get people to care, the better off you are in that sense. And anybody who's working as a consultant, freelance basis, this is a great tip. Always provide visibility and proof of your work. So oftentimes I've noticed that people care about results, but they are actually willing to give you a little bit of leeway if you see that you're really trying. So take care about like both the results, but also your intentions. If you're just there to build them money and you don't care, they're going to see through that really quickly. But if you're really transparent, you provide updates all the time, you also get them involved, they're much more likely to become a long-term client. So in a service business, it's not you against them. It's really like searching for that mutual win-win, as cheesy as it can really sound. All right, 3 pillars of a CRO program. So basically, if your CRO program is not successful, it's probably one of these pillars. So there's a way to oversimplify everything, and maybe this is one of those things. But if you're not getting the results, it's probably because you have either the wrong people, you don't have the right process, or your priorities are a little bit screwed up. Now, in my experience, it's probably most of the time the second or the third. And the reason for this is that as long as you have a really solid process, the people don't matter all that much. And that comes down to pretty much every company in a sense. If you think of McDonald's or Domino's or whatever, they have such great processes that the people actually don't matter that much. Now, I would kind of like put process and priorities into one bracket, but really like number 3 just means like maybe CRO is not a priority for you. So if you have the right process, right people on board, and you're still not getting results, then you might not be allocating enough time and resources for it. But keep in mind that the optimization is not a project. So when you think of optimizing a site, it's really an ongoing thing because this is more like a business as usual activity. It's one of those like continuous improvement progress type of things where you are actually testing and learning. So you don't just run like one test and like, okay, we won or lost, and then like your optimization is done. Or you don't just do an audit if you have enough traffic, sales, and stop it there. Now, of course, this is more like for the big businesses, and maybe for a small e-commerce shop, this kind of optimization can be a little bit of a project basis that you might want to like visit once a year or something like that. So it's not a one size fits all advice that in that sense. Now, a little note, always be aware of people's agendas. So a great quote is be aware of people with perverse incentives. And it's the same thing. So if your incentives are misaligned, then you're going to get some kind of behavior that rewards those incentives. So an e-commerce example of this would be, for example, join my mailing list and get 10% off. Now, the incentive is like join the mailing list, but are those people really like curious, and do they really care what you have on your mailing list? What kind of messages you are going to get? So that would be like a perverse incentive in a sense that you are getting them on your mailing list, sure, at least initially, but they're probably not going to be engaged because they're going to be thinking like, all I did, or the reason why I did join this mailing list, it's not really because I was interested, but because I wanted the discount. So that would be one of the ways that you would provide people with the wrong agenda. So more of a note for myself here, to try to not talk with this data-driven hypothesis talk. It's tough when you try to be as objective as possible and you're used to talking with these type of things internally. But when you go to a customer, they're not going to be able to like resonate with this. So they want like tangible business results. So talking about hypothesis or something like that will never get you engagement. It will be a lot better to talk about assumptions, even though like technically hypothesis would be a better word. But that's the kind of language we're looking to eliminate. Then, user experience. Let me start with an unrelated quote. Don't really remember who it was from, but it was he who best understands the customer wins. So we should be curious about human behavior. Why are people buying from us? Why do they care? How can we make them care more? Etc. And once we have this down really well, we will be able to modify our headlines, craft our value propositions, etc. a lot better. So if we are naturally curious about human behavior, we're always going to get a little bit better with our offer, and we understand what is value on a level that our competitors don't. So essentially we are going beyond understanding just what they want, because what they want level is just like testing like, okay, which product is bought the most. It's more like level 1 or 2. But if you are actually understanding why they want it, you're in a position to upsell, cross-sell, present them with a better offer, craft your offer better, etc. So that is like being the king of the hill in a sense. So customers have so much options. So it's not about pushing, it's just how do we succeed in the pool? How do we make the offer so great that they actually want to take action? And this way we also get greater retention and engagement. So that's that talk. Then let's go actually beyond the user experience and expand on this a little bit. Now let's go back to hypotheses or assumptions that we tried to stay away from in the last talks, but here we go. Like you can pretty much apply this kind of hypothesis data-driven type of learning to optimize anything, whether it's in life, in your business, etc. So really a hypothesis statement would go like, by changing X we can achieve Y, and that should improve Z, for example. So this kind of if this happens, then this kind of thinking that is very much present with everything. And the way you would optimize a website or an ad campaign is not really any different from optimizing your gym habits or optimizing your nutrition or whatever you want to optimize in your life or business. So that's why optimizing and experimentation is our advantage. And really notice this in a fast changing world. So experimentation is actually more valuable in a faster changing world. So the faster things change, the more experimentation is valuable, more valuable it is. And intuitively, like you would think it's the opposite, but actually it's not, because if we wouldn't need experimentation, if best practices were enough, then we could just get locked with those best practices, never do any tests, never experiment, and we would be perfect. So that would be the world where nothing is changing. But the faster the world changes, sure, our findings get obsolete or like stop like being so relevant, but at the same time our we need to be like constantly searching for that findings, and then that will become our competitive advantage because we have knowledge that other people just don't have. We are doing things better than others. Okay, couple of things from this section. Notable, of course, like this is pretty obvious, but most people never scroll down to the bottom of the article. So if you have a blog post, for example, and you're looking to optimize that, so you would, like in a typical fashion, like old school, you would put some related articles on the bottom, maybe something like that. But since most people never scroll down to the bottom of the article, and if they found you on Google or something, you don't want them to bounce. And the way Google counts a bounce is they didn't click on any links. So we want them to click on links, we want them to get deeper into the page, we want them to read more. And the way we do this is add links within the article. So there would be like a regular text, and then would be like just a link to another article, or some call to actions here and there. But we want to reach a bit of a balance here. So it's not just like you adding more and more links and it goes and like you improve that way. The more links you have, the more the time spent goes up, but it's also like really crappy for scroll depth. So you essentially want both. You want both kind of engagement, so both the depth and the width. So you would like people to read more, really engage in it, engage in the content, relate to it. And oftentimes this is best for your actual conversions if you think of the end conversion. So if you have like an affiliate article or something and people really engage in it, that's usually better than them like skimming through like 4 articles. So it's a balancing act, and you need to be a little bit conscious of this. So more links, more time spent, less scroll depth, less engagement in that kind of like in-depth way. Also, metrics can be a little bit difficult, because if you have people that are confused, they don't understand your navigation, and then they randomly need to like try to find the information really badly, that is something that will actually look good in your stats. So in a sense, it's a high motivation, high friction situation where people really want to do something, but they just can't. Like, it's so difficult. And that looks good in a sense that there's so much engagement. People are viewing this page, they're like spending time, they're browsing around. They appear to be very interested, but they can as well be just confused. So something to keep in mind when you look at your Google Analytics stats. So we're back to involving people, involving teams in the optimization process. A couple things here. We talked about hypothesis, data-driven type of things here. And while those sound really exciting, they sound good to you, I feel smart when I say those things. But it's not actually great for understanding. And if people don't understand what you're saying, then that undermines your authority. Now, this is actually the opposite again, like what you would think. You would think like if you are spending time using like fancy Latin words or something, that would actually make you more of an expert. But all it actually does is make people confused. So they don't understand what you're saying, and that will actually undermine your authority. And you also need to be a little bit aware of people, because this kind of experimentation doesn't come naturally to everybody. And people in general are loss aware. So they are more afraid of what they might lose compared to what they might win. So if you get like you have an experiment that is losing by 5%. Now, people are way more on average like likely to be freaked out by that compared to a test that is winning by 5%. So that 5% test win is not that big of a deal compared to the 5% test loss. So they're like, oh my God, we lost so much money. So people are like looking at this in a way that if our test loses, it's a big deal. If it wins, it's a small deal. And that is something that you need to be aware of. And that is also like something you need to be prepared for. So your tests don't always win, but the good thing is that you get to keep those good decisions. So if you get a test that wins, you actually get to run it for the rest of like for a long time. Maybe not the rest of the lifetime of the website, but really you're sacrificing, let's say, half of your traffic for 1 month to really like have 60 good months, 60 better months as you would. So it's basically running a very low risk for a little while to get a big gain for a long time. So here's a couple of things that you can get buy-in in your organization, good for partners, etc. So have a transparency, share your KPIs so everybody can see whether you're achieving it or not. Then it's great to have a really tangible ROI metrics. So if you can say with precision that this is how much money we have made, and this is how much it has cost you. So your return on this investment was 800%, for example. That is a very tangible thing that a lot of finance people like, business owners like that kind of stuff, because then you're essentially showing like this money that you invested here wasn't wasted. And you can bet for that like 800% increase. You're going to be in a position where you can run a few tests that didn't win and still have that client commitment there. So always great to calculate ROI and also keep the client on the same page as what you're doing. So the more they understand it, the better. So once they understand the experiments and especially why you're running the experiments, that's great. And then also what you learn from those experiments are really good for that buy-in. All right, so we talked about that before. So that not everybody treats experimentation as a natural thing. So you're essentially failing to succeed for a little while. So you need to put your ego aside, be willing to fail for a little while so that you can succeed. But really, what you're looking to do is find a few winners, and then you can get that like nice compound effect going. So even if you appear to be wasting your time for a month or two, but once you start finding those winning tests, you get this nice compound effect going, and then you can see like, all right, product page is winning by 3%, front page few percent. So if somebody's going through this conversion path here, we're going to have a little bit of a compound effect here. And that's really like one of the miracles of life once you start getting that. But the same thing here. So imagine you were in a position in your life where you would just be able to throw away all the bad decisions. So you didn't eat that birthday cake a couple months ago or something like that. And here you are with your perfect body, so much money, etc. So if you run the testing the correct way and run your CRO program the correct way, you're actually able to keep all the good decisions and throw away all the bad decisions. So in a sense, as long as you have the correct process and implementation and people, then you are in a position where you can choose to only keep these good decisions, and that's really cool. But also you need to have the correct process, because most of the time it's not the concept that fails, but it's really the execution. So you might be running like A/B test that you quickly set up through Optimizely or something with the visual editor, and you're not even aware that everything's loading really bad, the mobile experience is completely screwed up, and then you look at your test and like minus 17% didn't work. Well, too bad. It's not necessarily the test that screwed it up, but your execution. And this is way more common that people would like to admit to themselves. So you need to properly QA, you need to have a correct process there, and that is really a key thing before you even get started. So let's talk about A/B testing for a smaller site. Now, this might be things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, because what I'm thinking is like, you want to have bigger wins, and you want to, for smaller sites, you want to still be able to reach the statistical significance, for example. I don't think 80% is necessarily okay, because you're going to get 20% false positives. So this is like creating a lot of splash, but creating a lot of splash doesn't mean that you're actually swimming and going forward. So I would still aim for similar numbers, like at least 90% statistical significance for small sites, but I would just do big changes, big tests. Also, this goes well with the usually lower budget of these smaller sites. But a couple things you can do, which I don't recommend, is like tracking micro conversions. Now, I wouldn't recommend tracking this as a main metric, but a lot of people seem to be happy with that. So if you get more add to carts, that would be a micro conversion in a sense. If you get more email subscribers, that would be a micro conversion. But it's really almost impossible to say which one of these micro conversions actually end up boosting revenue if you're only looking at those micro conversions. Because you can make the add to cart button or something like be super massive or like something like this. Maybe you get more clicks, but do you actually get more sales? So you might be actually just delaying the drop off there, and that's never good. So with smaller sites, focus more on qualitative metrics. You can do user testing, ask your customers more, do that kind of thing rather than doing pure A/B testing, hardcore conversion optimization type of thing. This is more like a human approach compared to data-driven approach. So that's pretty much that. Then let's go on to the last talk, the keynote. So a lot of CRO is combining multiple disciplines. So you have to be good in a lot of things. So let's say like you would have to be a decent copywriter to really understand like what's a good headline, what's not. You would have to know a little bit about coding to be able to set up testing. You would have to know something about psychology to understand that. You would have to know a little bit, preferably about advertisement, understanding the customer path, things like this. Then you would have to know technical things like how do we optimize images, etc. It goes really deep. So it is combining multiple disciplines into one. But essentially it's about solving these problems for the customers, for the visitors. So in a sense, like if you think of the word optimizer, that would imply that you go to a site, you do a bunch of things, and suddenly it's optimized. But it's actually not really about that. It's about solving problems in a sense. But the problem is like you're not solving your own problems, you're solving somebody else's problems. And oftentimes you don't even know what the problems are. So in that sense, it can be a difficult thing. And you often have to dig quite deep into what the problems are, how people are doing this, etc. So how are you best solving the people's problems? So just to finish off this part and really this series, it's not really about you. It's never about you. It's always about them. You basically exist to serve this market, and this is why, in a sense, like you don't matter. Your opinions don't matter. Your preferences don't matter, because you are not your buyer, and you have a different level of knowledge than your buyers. So it's really about them, and it has always been about them, and it should always be about them. So if there's something to take away from this, stop being so selfish and start thinking more empathetically. Start thinking more like a customer. Try to put yourself in their shoes. So hopefully you enjoyed the series. Impressed if you watched every single video. That was a lot of information and it was a lot of fun to do this. So make sure to subscribe for next year's videos, and I'll see you on the future ones. Cheers.